Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about shrinking agricultural trade surplus of India. Now, trade surplus is something that we can associate with the excess of export over the import. So, the overall, if you talk about in last one decade, what we have seen is the value of India's agricultural import has surpassed its total agricultural export. So, what are the factors that has affected it? What is the agricultural export and import basket of India, and to which of the major countries India largely exports its agricultural good? Let us try to understand this in more detail. Now, first of all, to give you an idea briefly about how the changes in both export and import basket, especially in the field of agriculture, has taken place. So, as per the recent report published by the Ministry of Commerce, it has stated that if you compare the two corresponding years, that is the quarter of April to December 2023 and then April to December 2024, what we are witnessing is a rise in the export. This rise has happened to a tune of somewhere about 6.5%, because in the preceding year of 2023, you can see the total export value of the agricultural goods stood at $35.2 billion, and then the year 2024 it has risen to $37.5 billion. Now, on the other hand, if you look at the import, the rise in import is much more greater than the export. As compared to 6.5% of export rise, import has risen by a stellar value of 18.7%. And today, India's import volume value, we can say, stand at around $29.3 billion. So the trade surplus that we are talking about will stand somewhere about 37.5 minus 29.3. So $8.5 billion of trade surplus India enjoys in the agricultural goods. Though even we are having a trade surplus today, it does not mean that this trade surplus will stay in the future. Many times we know that geopolitical changes are taking place across many countries, and especially from the United States of America after coming of President Trump. So all this is going to have impact on this value as well in the future. And overall, if you talk about in last few years, if you talk about 23-24 itself, the value has declined from $10.6 billion, the trade surplus value they're talking about, from 10.6 billion dollars in 23-24 to 8.2 billion dollars in the fiscal year of 2024 itself. And this is something that paints a worrisome picture for the agricultural export of India or overall agricultural trades of India. Now, the narrowing surplus we talk about, we can understand by looking at the pattern in the last 10 years. If you talk about year 2012 and 2013, we can see that since then India has been a net agri commodities exporter with the value of its outward shipment consistently exceeding imports. And this is something that India has maintained in last 10 years. For example, in 2012-2013, the value of export was very high, $41.7 billion, while the value of import were only $19 billion. That means if you calculate the trade surplus in this time, it will come somewhere about $22 billion. So you can understand at the beginning of this decade, India had enjoyed a trade surplus of $20 billion, and since then it had continuously shrunk, and today we have a trade surplus of just $8.6 billion. So this is what we are talking about, the change of trend that we are witnessing. Now, the reason in the shift of export can be multiple in nature, but the major factors that experts argue has contributed to this decline can be considered as we can say as the narrowing of the export or limitation of the Indian export goods. These dipped during the initial years of Narendra Modi late government specifically. If talk about the total export value of agricultural commodities from India, it dipped from $43.3 billion in 2013-2014. That was the year when Narendra Modi has taken the charge of the country, helm of the country, to $35.6 billion in 2019-2020. And at the same time, the exports are declining and also imports are rising. So import have risen from $15.5 billion to almost $21.9 billion. Now, this also is associated not only with the domestic factors, but the international factors, where we are seeing the crash in the international commodity prices. So when the global commodity prices, especially in the field of agriculture, declines, what it causes is this competitiveness of the Indian agricultural commodities will erode. Indian agricultural exporters will erode, as many other countries will join the rank to sell their agricultural goods. And in this context, we can refer to the Food and Agriculture Organization's report as well. As per the FAO report, if you look at the year between 2013-14 to 2019-20, it has shown that the food price index has plunged from 119.1 to 96.4. That means there is a basically, we can say, decline in the global food prices. And this causes erosion of competitiveness for India's agricultural export. So to some extent, this also is responsible for the dwindling or declining India's agricultural export. We talk about the FAO index. Now we know that after 2019-20, two major global developments have taken place. First was, for a couple of years, the entire world was witnessing the we can say witnessing the COVID-19 pandemic, and that has massively disrupted the supply chain in every sector, including agriculture as well. Second is, in the year 2022, we know that Russia has invaded Ukraine, and both of these countries were major exporter of many of agricultural goods, including wheat and sunflower specifically. So these two development have again resulted in the rise of FAO index from 133.1 in 21-22 to 140.6 in 22-23. Now, obviously, as the FAO index rises, it basically tells you that the global food prices are increasing. And it is because of this, India's agricultural export also increased, because again, the India's agricultural exporters began to utilize the cost competitiveness that they enjoy when the food prices are relatively higher. So that has resulted in the surge of export from 50.2 to 53.2 billion dollars in these corresponding years of 23 and 22 and 23. Now, if you look at the overall export basket of India in the field of agriculture, the largest share that it export is of marine products, and especially shrimp is the major product here. And in case of country-wise, US alone enjoys 34.5% of share in India's export of the marine products. And that is something that we have to worry about, because you know that Donald Trump, after taking charge of US presidency, has always hinted about imposing additional tariff, and he specifically has targeted countries such as China, India and Mexico. So any such kind of trade tariff, trade barrier that is imposed by the president of US can again cause a decline or dip in the overall marine products exported by India to US. So in the future, in the coming year, we might see again a further decline in the overall trade value or export value of agricultural basket. Now, apart from marine products, you have rice, then you have spices, buffalo meat, tobacco, sugar, fruits and vegetables. And you can see from the list, these are the major items India's agriculture sector exported. And currently, if we talk about the April-December 2024 time frame, India's export volume, export value, we can say, stand roughly at $38 billion. And that has declined from $53 billion it had in the 22-23. Now, if we talk about the overall percentage contribution, so 15% of the agricultural export is marine product itself, we have discussed before as well. 21% is rice, this will include both basmati rice as well as non-basmati rice. Then you have major spice production and spice export that India involves in, such as cardamom, chili and all. Then we have buffalo meat, sugar, fruits and vegetable, tobacco and coffee. So these are what you can call as a top 7 export commodities that India had in its agricultural basket. If we talk about from the country's perspective, so again, US is the largest importer of India's agricultural goods with a total share of 10.55%. And again, you have to understand the impact of tariff can play a significant role here, where the share in the coming days or coming years we can see declining further. Then next is obviously China. Then we have United Arab Emirates, neighboring country. Then you have Saudi Arabia, and then you have Bangladesh. So US, China, UAE, Saudi Arabia and Bangladesh, these are the top 5 countries where most of India's agricultural goods are being exported to. Now, there are several other factors that are affecting export as well, because we have discussed that in last 3 years, the export value of India's agricultural goods have come down from around $53 billion to $38 billion. So the reason behind this is obviously government restriction. Especially we talk about the non-basmati rice, several limitations were imposed about their import to outside of India, export outside of India, and that was largely because of the domestic availability. There was concern that there might not be enough food or food items for the people, the Indian citizens itself, as well as the rising food inflation or food prices were rising up. So to control them, government has imposed certain sort of restrictions on the exports. That might also be one factor behind the shrinking of the value. Second, export of rice on the other hand have now continued to boom. In that is something that we are seeing in the last 1 year, and that is because most of the restriction that the government has imposed earlier, they are gradually, the curbs that they have imposed, they are gradually withdrawing it and gradually they are lifting it. On the other hand, talk about the basmati rice, which is much more costlier and expensive. Apart from spices, coffee and tobacco, these are likely to scale new records and India might export them to a highest value in last 1 decade. The reason is because not only domestic factors, but also you have the global factors that are influencing here. For example, apart from India, the Brazil and Vietnam are two major countries which have a competitiveness with India in having a global share of coffee market. Now, in these countries, what we have seen is drought-like situation that have led to a significant decline in the coffee yield in Brazil. And on the other hand, in the Vietnam, that is a coastal country situated along the Pacific Ocean, East China Sea, South China Sea, there you have a typhoon, that is a kind of tropical cyclone, we can say. So both of these extreme weather events have disrupted the coffee supply from these countries, and now India's coffee exporters are able to basically fill this gap. So that is why we can expect increase in the coffee export in the coming years. Tobacco export also will increase because again Brazil and Zimbabwe, two major tobacco producers, are witnessing crop failures. On the other hand, India will not have any significant decline in the production of tobacco as such. So again, India can fill this gap. So basmati rice, coffee and tobacco, apart from spices, where India traditionally have enjoyed, we can say, a leadership role, that is where something we can see increasing in the future. Now, as far as the import is concerned, we can see the major import that India depends upon in agriculture sector is the vegetable oils or edible oils, we can say. Then you have pulses, then fresh fruits, cashew, spices, raw cotton and natural rubber. So these are what you can call as the top 7 agricultural commodity India imports. And if you look at the value comparing last 3-4 years, we can see the value of import has declined, and from $35.7 billion in 22-23 to $29.2 billion in April-December 2024. So this is something that we can understand from figurative point. Now, within that also, if you look at the percentage share of the different commodities, so vegetable oil, as we can see, holds the largest share of the import basket, agricultural import basket for India. India is heavily dependent upon other countries such as Russia, Ukraine, Indonesia, Malaysia for palm oil, Russia, Ukraine from the for the sunflower oil. So vegetable oil is 45%, and then you have pulses 11%, fruits and vegetables, sugar, spices, cashew, all these are less than 5 to 8%. So this is how we can understand the import basket of the agricultural goods. Now there are several factors that have impacted import of agricultural commodity into India as well. For example, you talk about the pulses. Overall, if you look at the last 1 decade, what we have witnessed is the decline in the overall pulse import. In the year 2016-2017, the value stood at $4.2 billion. And today it has just come down to the average of $1.7 billion if you take the average of last 5 years. And this has largely happened because of the shift of the Indian producer, Indian farmer, from the cereal crops to the pulses. That is largely due to both the benefit of the pulse cultivation and also overall encouragement by the government given to the farmers as such. Second, if we talk about the edible oils, there India has to face several problems in the last few years, largely because you know that due to the war in Ukraine, the global prices of the edible oil have increased significantly, and that is why the import value of the edible oil also increased significantly for India. In case of spices, India is both importer as well as exporter. And most interestingly, cotton was somewhere where India had begun to take a leadership role or the lead exporter of the cotton in the world, largely because of the BT revolution. BT revolution, that is the basis of the genetic modification of crops, especially cotton crops. BT stands for Bacillus thuringiensis, a kind of bacteria that is actually used for the genetic modification of the cotton crops. And these modified hybrids today are used over more than 90% of the cotton fields for production. So over a period of time, this has caused a significant surge in the cotton production from India, and today India has turned into the world's second largest exporter of cotton after the United States of America. So that is why the export volume also was very higher in last couple of years. However, in last 2 years, what we have witnessed is the dwindling or declining cotton production from India. And the country's cotton exports, which were valued, if you look at in the 2011-2012 at $4.3 billion. From there, it has seen a steep decline of just $781 million in 22-23, and in the last fiscal of 23-24, it has again increased slightly to $1.1 billion. But from 4.3 to 1.1, that is a very significant and steep decline in cotton production, and that largely is because of three factors. First factor is because genetic modification of the crop or the GM cotton crops that the farmers are growing across Indian field. Earlier, it was thought that it is resistant to all kind of pests, all kind of pest attack, we can say. But now this is not the case. In many areas, we have seen a fresh infestation in the cotton crops, and that has caused decline in the lower yield. Not only that, the overall acreage of the land over which cotton was grown in 2015-2016, that area also has shrunk gradually, and that also has contributed to the declining stock of the cotton that India has with itself. Third is escalating prices of cotton that we have seen in the global market, and due to all these three factors combined, India today has turned from an exporter of cotton to a net importer of cotton. So not only the export have declined, but the import value of the cotton has also overtaken the export value of cotton in India. We can take a look at the figure again to understand more properly. If you look at the raw cotton in the recent year, the import value stands at somewhere about $918 million. So this is how we can understand. And then if you talk about the export volume of the raw cotton, it is just $575 million. So today, if we talk about cotton specifically, India runs a trade deficit roughly about 300 to 400 million dollars. So this is again a worrisome scenario from the second largest exporter to such kind of situation. So there is something where we need a imminent or urgent interference or intervention. So that is all about this particular video. I hope you got the gist of the various factors that has affected the change overall in the last one decade in both India's export as well as import in the field of agriculture, and how and why the trade surplus has been dwindling in last couple of years. I think you now got a fair idea about. So if you like the video, please hit the like button, share it with your fellow aspirants, as well as subscribe to our channel for more such content. Thank you very much.